Welcome to week one on Clair de Lune. Of course, we're in France, so that means lots of boulangeries. Here we are, first narrow bridge of the morning. Height-wise, we don't have any concerns, but it's always fun when you try to sneak through something that's only slightly wider than Clair. And of course, less than the width, it's the height. So I did mention that height-wise we had no concerns. That proved to in fact be wrong. You'll see here we are 3.45 metres. The bridges are all 3.5 metres. There is not a lot of clearance between the top of the wheelhouse and the bridges. That becomes relevant a little later in the video. Here we hit a sandbank, literally reverse off and away you go. Underway, you're not very far above the water, makes for a really pleasant trip looking out the windows beneath. As you can see, we've been heading uphill, so when you're in the lock, the water absolutely gushes in and pushes you around. Eventually, though, we reached the top and crossed over, and we started the next day to head downhill. Here we cruised through a town with some raising bridges. This was actually a lot of fun, something different, and a lot more room to pass through. Okay, not a super exciting photo, but this is a major supermarket with a boat park. And then that night we hauled up alongside a minor road and slept outside a lock waiting for it to open the next morning. Super exciting. One problem with Clair de Lune was the house batteries and the engine batteries were actually wired together. I split them off, so we now have separate engine batteries. Okay, this is relevant. Notice this road. A lot of locks have a road like this immediately opposite. The lock opens onto another section of the canal. It's called a pound. And all of this water, it's about 1,000 cubic meters perhaps, drops into that. And it will hit the end of the pound at the next lock, and it will cause an ebb, a wave that bounces back. You also have problems when you go downhill with water dripping on your boat. But, at the end of that day, we were a fairly successful day. We stopped, we had cheesecake. It was a good time. The next morning, we headed off, and you can see here Claire slowly pulling off the bank. This is actually in real time. It gives you a sense of just how slowly she moves, especially as she's just getting underway and working her way around these tight bends. Here, this is a time lapse of Karina manoeuvring Claire into the lock. I think we had to wait a moment for this. So the boat's coming from a standstill, which means she's lost momentum and makes it a little bit harder to line up, but she's done a great job. And just a minor tap on the way in, and Claire slides into the lock there before we start to descend down again. And this is where things start to go wrong. I mentioned the bridges across the locks as you exit. We went down one that had a fairly low bridge. The water bounced across the pound, came back, the wheelhouse kicked up, and the front of it snagged. I powered forward, and we managed to sneak the rest of it underneath, but the front got quite damaged, 3 windows smashed, showered with glass. Fortunately, no one hurt. We really stuck on what to do. We stopped at the next town, and we decided to disassemble the wheelhouse, drop it down so we could get under some more low bridges. And when we did that, we felt a little better about things because we could see that there was a chance we could probably repair it. So we pushed on until we reached the town of Chani, which was a real shame because we passed some stunning scenery. But when we got there late at night, we put a tarp over the disassembled wheelhouse to protect us from the rain. And then the next morning it was up early and straight off to the hardware store. There we started collecting bits and pieces, basically reinforcing planks of wood, some wood glue, some wood screws, and we started putting the wheelhouse back together again. We took out the broken glass, we fitted acrylic sheets over the windows, we screwed planks in place, and then finally, the moment of truth, Paul and I were able to lift the window up, and it was such a relief to see it worked. And so we then started putting the wheelhouse back together again. Fortunately, it was only the first section that was really damaged. You can see battens holding the windows here, the two permanent planks as reinforcing at the moment that will obviously need to get repaired later. And finally, everything back in place. So after leaving Chani, we went on to Fragny overnight, and then the next day, that's today, we went down this large lock. It's one of the largest in France. The water level drops around 10 metres. It's quite something heading down to the bottom of that very, very sort of tomb-like structure. The huge doors that lift up, and that's it there behind us. And finally, here we are in St-Jean-de-Losne, and we're moored up alongside for the first time. And yeah, after a big week, it's a chance to put our feet back. We've got some chores to do tomorrow, and then we're going to be heading off by ourselves, off up the river.